Clara Whitfield almost did not step off that train. For one long second, as the wheels screamed against the tracks and the conductor called out Elk Crossing, she stayed frozen in her seat. Her hands were wrapped so tight around the handle of her worn suitcase that her fingers had gone white. If she stayed seated, the train would carry her somewhere else, somewhere unknown, somewhere far from the mistake she was about to face. But she had nowhere else to go. So she stood. The platform at Elk Crossing was smaller than she had imagined. The letters from Garrett Prescott had spoken of wide skies and promise and new beginnings. The station looked tired instead. Dust clung to the wooden boards. The wind pushed dry air across her face, stealing the little moisture left in her lips. Clara stepped down onto the platform and looked around. But no one waved. No one stepped forward. No man in a fine hat holding flowers. No rancher scanning faces for the woman who had agreed to become his wife. Just strangers greeting other strangers, and families embracing like they had been apart for years. Clara stood still as the crowd thinned. The train hissed behind her like it was laughing. One by one, the other passengers left. The conductor tipped his hat and climbed back aboard. The train pulled away, and Clara Whitfield was alone. She swallowed hard and forced her chin up. Garrett had received her telegram. He knew the day and the hour she would arrive. Perhaps he was delayed. Ranch work. Cattle. Something reasonable. A young station worker approached her, freckles scattered across his nose. "You waiting on someone, ma'am?" "Yes," Clara said carefully. "Garrett Prescott. Well, he was meant to meet me." The boy's expression changed in a way she did not like. His smile faded. He shifted his weight. "You the mail-order bride?" Clara felt heat rise in her face, but nodded. The boy glanced toward the general store across the street, then back at her. "Mr. Prescott ain't here." "I can see that," Clara said, her voice steady. "Do you know where he is?" Before the boy could answer, a sharp voice cut in. "Billy, you get back to work." An older woman marched toward them. Her gray hair was pulled tight at the back of her head. Her dress was plain but clean. She looked at Clara with eyes that had seen too much. "You must be the latest one," the woman said. "The latest what?" Clara asked. "The latest bride Prescott ordered from back east." The words hit harder than any slap. "Ordered?" Clara repeated, and the woman crossed her arms. "You're the fourth girl in 2 years." The platform seemed to tilt under Clara's feet. The first ran after a week. The second lost her savings and never saw him again. The third, the woman paused. The third left town quiet. Clara's grip tightened on her suitcase. "Where is he?" she asked. "Gone," the woman said. "Left 3 days ago. Headed east, from what I heard." 3 days. Garrett had known she was coming. He had known, and he had left anyway. Clara did not cry. She had learned long ago that tears did not change anything. She had left Boston because there was nothing for her there. No family, no money, no future. She had borrowed the train fare from her employer and placed her hope in 4 carefully written letters. But now, she stood in Wyoming with $17 in her pocket and no husband. "Is there work in this town?" she asked. The older woman studied her. "That's your first question?" "Yes." The woman's mouth softened just a little. "Name's Alma Beckett. I run the general store. There ain't much work for a woman alone. Laundry pays pennies. The saloon pays worse." "I don't need comfort," Clara said. "I need a roof." Before Alma could answer, a sound cut through the air. "Mama!" It was sharp and desperate, and full of something that made Clara turn without thinking. A small boy was running straight toward her. He was thin and dusty, dark hair sticking out in every direction. His boots slapped against the wooden boards. Tears streaked his face, carving clean lines through the dirt. "Mama!" he shouted again. But Clara barely had time to react before he crashed into her. His arms wrapped around her waist. He clung to her like he was afraid she might disappear. "You came back," he sobbed. "I knew you would." Clara froze. Her hands hovered awkwardly above his head. She could feel him shaking, feel how tight he held on. Behind him, a tall man hurried forward. "Noah," the man said roughly. "Son, let go." The boy shook his head harder. "She looks just like her. Papa, she does." The man stopped a few feet away. He was broad-shouldered, sunburned, with dark eyes that carried deep shadows. He looked at Clara, and something passed over his face. Shock, pain, recognition. "My wife passed last winter," he said quietly. "Fever. He sometimes thinks." Noah pulled back just enough to look up at Clara. His brown eyes were wide and broken. "You smell like soap," he whispered. "Mama used to smell like soap and bread." Clara felt something inside her chest move, something she had locked away years ago. She knelt down slowly. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Noah Hawkins." "Well, Noah Hawkins, I'm Clara. I'm not your mama, but I'm very glad you ran to me." He studied her face, searching for something. Then he pressed his forehead against her shoulder again. The tall man cleared his throat. "I'm Jesse Hawkins," he said. "I'm sorry for the scene." "There's nothing to apologize for," Clara replied. Alma Beckett stepped forward. "She's Prescott's bride," she told Jesse. "Or was meant to be. He skipped town." Jesse's jaw tightened. "Prescott. You know him?" Clara asked. "Enough to know you're better off without him." Clara almost laughed at the word better. And better meant nothing when you had nowhere to sleep. "I'm looking for work," she said plainly. Jesse glanced at Noah, who still refused to let go of her skirt. "I could use help at the ranch," he said slowly. "Housekeeping, cooking, room and board, $20 a month." Clara blinked. "You don't know me." Jesse met her eyes. "You knelt down and talked to my boy like he mattered. That tells me enough." Silence stretched between them. The train was long gone. The town had resumed its quiet rhythm. Wind moved dust across the platform. Noah looked up at her. "Don't leave," he whispered. Clara had left everything she ever knew. She had stepped onto a train with nothing but a broken suitcase and stubborn hope. Now, hope stood in front of her in the shape of a grieving man and a trembling child. "I'll come," she said. Noah smiled through tears. The wagon ride to the Hawkins ranch was long. The land stretched wide and empty under a pale sky. Clara sat beside Jesse. Noah pressed against her side like he feared she might vanish if he blinked. The house appeared at sunset. It was large but worn. Curtains hung in the windows. A garden sat untended out front. The porch swing creaked softly in the wind. Inside, the air held the faint scent of lavender. Clara felt it immediately. The presence of someone who had loved this place deeply. "She used to sing while she cooked," Noah said quietly as they stepped into the kitchen. "Mama did." Clara set her suitcase down. "I don't sing very well," she said softly. "That's okay," Noah replied. "You can learn." That night, Clara lay awake listening to the sounds of the house. Jesse's footsteps downstairs, and the wind against the shutters. A small knock came at her door. She opened it to find Noah standing there, eyes wide. "Are you staying?" he asked. "For tonight," Clara said. "That's enough." He nodded and padded back down the hall. Clara closed the door and leaned against it. She had come to Wyoming to marry a stranger who had abandoned her. Instead, She had found a house full of grief, and a little boy who had called her Mama before she had even chosen to stay. She pressed her hand against her chest. For the first time since stepping off that train, she did not feel alone. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. She did not know if Prescott would return. She did not know if this arrangement would last a week or a year. But downstairs, a father tried to be strong for his son. And in the next room, a child slept easier because she was under the same roof. Clara Whitfield had almost given up on that platform. She had almost climbed back onto the train. If she had, she would have missed the moment that changed everything. The moment a 7-year-old boy ran across a dusty station and chose her. Mama. The first morning at the Hawkins Ranch began before sunrise. Clara woke to the sound of boots moving across wooden floors and the faint clatter of a kettle in the kitchen. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then the smell reached her. Coffee. Strong and bitter. She sat up in the narrow bed and looked around the small guest room. The walls were plain. The curtains were faded. A thin layer of dust clung to the dresser. This had once been someone's room. Someone who no longer lived here. She dressed quickly and pinned her hair back. When she stepped into the kitchen, Jesse stood at the stove, staring down at a blackened pan like it had personally offended him. "You're up early," he said, without looking at her. "So are you." He gave a short breath that might have been a laugh. "Ranch don't wait." Clara stepped closer and examined the pan. Whatever he had tried to cook had burned beyond saving. "Is that breakfast?" she asked carefully. "It was meant to be." Clara reached for the pan and set it aside. Move!" Jesse blinked. "Excuse me? If I'm working here, I might as well start properly." She found flour in the cupboard, eggs in a small basket near the back door, butter wrapped in cloth. The kitchen was messy, but it had everything she needed. Within minutes, the sound of whisking and kneading replaced the quiet heaviness that had filled the room. Jesse leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching her like he wasn't sure what to make of this woman who had arrived yesterday with nothing and was now moving through his kitchen as if she had always belonged there. "You don't have to prove anything," he said. "I'm not proving anything," Clara replied. "I'm hungry." He almost smiled. Noah burst into the room a few minutes later, hair wild, eyes wide. "You're still here," he said in open relief. I said I would be." He ran to the table and climbed into his chair. When Clara set a plate of warm biscuits in front of him, his mouth dropped open. "Real food," he whispered. Jesse sat slowly, staring at his own plate. He took one bite and paused. "These are good," he said quietly. "They're just biscuits." "They're not burned." Noah laughed, and the sound filled the kitchen in a way that made Clara's chest tighten. After breakfast, Jesse headed outside to tend to the cattle. Noah followed, but lingered near the door. "Can I show you Mama's flowers?" he asked Clara. She hesitated only a second. "I'd like that." The garden out front had once been carefully planned. Rows of wildflowers bordered the porch. Now weeds tangled between them. "She planted these," Noah said, kneeling in the dirt. "Every spring." Clara crouched beside him. She brushed soil away from a struggling bloom. "They just need care," she said softly. "Will you help me fix it?" "Yes." They worked side by side for an hour, pulling weeds, clearing space. Clara felt the sun warm her back and the wind tug at her skirt. For the first time in years, the work did not feel like survival. It felt like building. That afternoon, Jesse returned from the far pasture with a troubled look. "Prescott's back in town," he said without preamble. Clara stilled. "How do you know?" "Ran into Tom Whitaker near the eastern fence. He saw Prescott at the trading post yesterday, talking. About me? Jesse's jaw tightened. About the bride who ran off to live with a widower. Clara stood slowly. I didn't run. I know that. He left me. I know that too. Silence stretched between them. Noah looked from one to the other. Is it the bad man? Yes, Jesse answered. Noah's small hands clenched into fists. He can't take her. Jesse knelt in front of his son. No one's taking anyone. Clara forced her voice steady. He doesn't have that power. Jesse stood. He's got money. That buys him influence. I didn't take anything from him. That won't stop him from saying you did. The truth hung in the air. In a territory where reputation meant everything, a man with money could twist a story into whatever he wanted. What will he do? Clara asked. Jesse looked at the horizon like he could see the future written in the dust. He'll try to claim you. I'm not property. No, Jesse said firmly. You're not. That night, Clara lay awake again. The ranch had begun to feel less like a temporary refuge and more like something fragile and important. She heard footsteps outside her door, a soft knock. Clara? Noah whispered. She opened the door. I had a dream, he said, eyes wide. The bad man took you. She knelt and pulled him close. I'm not going anywhere, she said. You promise? Clara hesitated. She had learned long ago that promises were dangerous things, but she looked at this boy who had lost his mother and still ran toward hope. I promise I won't disappear, she said carefully. If I ever leave, I'll tell you first. He thought about it, then nodded. That's enough. The next morning, the sound of horses broke the quiet before breakfast. Clara froze at the kitchen window. 5 riders approached from the east. Jesse stepped onto the porch, eyes dark. Inside, he said to Clara. No. Clara. I won't hide. His gaze locked with hers for a long second. Then he nodded once. Stay behind me. The riders stopped in the yard. Garrett Prescott dismounted first. He looked exactly as she remembered from his photograph. Clean coat, polished boots, a smile that never reached his eyes. Well, he called smoothly. There she is. Clara felt her stomach turn, but forced herself to step forward beside Jesse. You didn't meet me at the station, she said clearly. Prescott spread his hands. Business delay. You left 3 days before I arrived. Miscommunication. You abandoned me. He smiled thinly. You're dramatic. Jesse's hand curled at his side. State your business, he said coldly. What's my business is my bride. I'm not your bride, Clara said. You signed an agreement. I signed a letter. You broke it. Prescott's eyes hardened. You traveled here under my name. You belong to me. I belong to no one. A murmur passed between the men behind him. Prescott took a step forward. Come now, Clara. Don't make this unpleasant. It already is. Jesse shifted slightly, placing himself fully between them. She's not going with you. Prescott's smile vanished. I have witnesses. I have papers. You're harboring what is legally mine. The word mine hung heavy in the air. Clara stepped around Jesse. I'm standing right here, she said. You don't speak about me like I'm livestock. Prescott's jaw tightened. You have no money, no family, no protection. Clara met his gaze without flinching. I have more than you think. Prescott laughed, but it sounded forced. We'll see. He signaled to one of his men, who produced folded documents. Sheriff will hear about this, Prescott continued. And when he does, you'll come quietly, or you'll come escorted. Noah stepped out onto the porch. "She's not yours," he shouted. Jesse grabbed him gently and pulled him back. "Inside, son." Prescott mounted his horse again. "This isn't finished," he said. Then he turned and rode off, his men following close behind. Dust settled slowly over the yard. Clara felt her legs weaken only after they were gone. "He'll come back," Jesse said quietly. "I know. He'll try to use the law. I didn't do anything wrong. Doesn't matter, he'll twist it." Noah slipped his hand into Clara's. "I won't let him take you," he said fiercely. Clara looked down at him. Something had changed in the last 2 days. She had arrived with nothing. Now she had something to lose. She had a boy who watched her like she was the answer to a prayer. She had a man who stood in front of her without hesitation. She felt fear, yes, but beneath it, something stronger. Resolve. "I'm not running," she said. Jesse looked at her. "Good," he replied, "because neither am I." Prescott did not wait long. 2 mornings later, the sheriff rode up the long dirt path to the Hawkins ranch with a folded paper in his hand and a troubled look on his face. Clara saw him first. Jesse was mending a fence post. Noah was feeding the chickens. The sky was wide and blue and calm, like nothing bad could ever happen under it. But Clara knew better. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked toward the yard. Sheriff Wade Coulter dismounted slowly. "Morning," he said. "Sheriff," Jesse replied. Coulter's eyes moved to Clara, not unkind, just careful. "Miss Whitfield," he began. "Garrett Prescott filed a complaint." Clara kept her back straight. "On what grounds?" "He claims breach of contract and fraud, says he paid your travel fare and that you refused to fulfill the marriage agreement." A flicker of anger rose in Clara's chest. "I borrowed the money myself." "I have proof." Coulter nodded. "You'll need it." Noah ran up and grabbed Clara's skirt. "What's happening?" he asked. Jesse placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "It's grown-up talk." Clara looked at the sheriff. "What happens now?" "There'll be a hearing," Coulter said. "In town. Judge Harrison will preside." "And if the judge believes him?" Coulter hesitated. "Then legally, you could be required to honor the contract or repay damages." Clara felt the ground shift beneath her again. "I don't have damages to repay." "I know." The sheriff looked at Jesse. "You planning to stand with her?" Jesse did not hesitate. "Every step." Coulter nodded once. "Then I suggest you both prepare." That night, the ranch felt heavier. Clara sat at the kitchen table with the letters Prescott had sent her spread in front of her. 4 carefully written promises, flowery words about kindness and partnership, lies wrapped in ink. Jesse leaned against the doorway. "You still have them?" he asked quietly. "Yes." "Good." Noah wandered in with a drawing in his hands. It was simple. 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a house. 1 tall, 1 medium, 1 small. "Who's that?" Clara asked gently. "That's Papa," Noah said, pointing to the tall one. "That's you, and that's me." Clara's throat tightened. "You drew me here?" "You live here," she swallowed. "Even if the judge says I can't?" Noah looked confused. "Why would he say that?" "Because sometimes grown-ups make mistakes." Noah thought about it. "Then we fix it." Clara smiled faintly. If only it were that simple. The hearing took place 3 days later. The courthouse was small but packed. Word had spread quickly through Elk Crossing. Some people came out of curiosity. Others came because they knew Prescott too well. Clara sat beside Jesse. Noah sat in the front row between Mrs. Beckett and the preacher's wife. Prescott entered wearing a dark coat and a confident smile. He did not look at Clara at first. When he did, he gave her a small nod, as if this were merely a misunderstanding. The judge called the room to order. Prescott's lawyer spoke first. He described Clara as a woman who had willingly signed a marriage contract and then chosen to live with another man. He painted her as ungrateful, dishonest, manipulative. Clara listened without flinching. When it was her turn, she stood. "I signed a letter," she said clearly. "I agreed to marry a man who promised to meet me at the station. He did not. He left town 3 days before I arrived. I was abandoned with no money and no place to go." Murmurs filled the room. "I borrowed my travel fare from my employer in Boston. I have her letter confirming the loan." She handed the proof to the bailiff. Prescott's lawyer objected. The judge examined the paper. "Mr. Prescott," Judge Harrison said, "do you have evidence that you paid this woman's fare?" Prescott shifted. "My word should be enough." The judge's expression hardened. "It is not." Mrs. Beckett stood from the gallery. "Your Honor, I have something to add." The judge allowed it. Mrs. Beckett described the other women who had arrived before Clara. She spoke of whispered stories, missing money, bruises no one wanted to talk about. But the courtroom grew very quiet. Prescott's confident smile began to crack. Jessie was called to the stand next. "Did Miss Whitfield seek you out?" the judge asked. "No," Jessie said. "My boy ran to her." A faint ripple of laughter passed through the room. "She was alone on the platform," Jessie continued. "Prescott wasn't there. She asked for work. I offered it. That's all." Prescott finally stood. "She is my fiancée," he insisted. "She belongs with me." Clara's heart pounded, but her voice did not shake. "I do not belong to anyone." The judge leaned back in his chair. "Marriage requires consent," he said firmly. "A contract cannot bind someone who was abandoned before the arrangement was fulfilled." He looked directly at Prescott. "This court finds no legal obligation forcing Miss Whitfield to marry you. That the complaint is dismissed." The gavel struck. A collective breath released in the room. Noah jumped to his feet. "She stays!" he shouted. The room erupted in quiet laughter and relieved whispers. Prescott's face turned red. "This isn't over," he muttered. But this time, the words sounded empty. He stormed out of the courtroom alone. Clara remained standing. For the first time since stepping off that train, she felt steady ground beneath her feet. Outside the courthouse, sunlight flooded the street. Noah ran to her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "You won," he said proudly. Clara knelt and hugged him tightly. "We did." Jessie stood beside them. "You're free," he said softly. Clara looked up at him. "I was always free." He held her gaze a moment longer than necessary. That night, back at the ranch, the air felt lighter. Clara stood on the porch, watching the sky turn orange and purple. The wind moved gently through the grass. Jessie stepped beside her. "You could still leave," he said quietly. "You're not tied here." She looked at him. "Do you want me to?" He took a breath. "No." Silence settled between them. Noah burst out the front door, holding something small in his hand. It was a wilted wildflower. "For you," he said. Clara took it carefully. "Thank you." He studied her face. "You're staying, right?" Clara looked at Jessie, then at the house, then at the endless Wyoming sky. She thought of the train platform, the empty space where Prescott should have stood, the moment she almost gave up, and she thought of a small boy running toward her without fear. "Yes," she said. Noah beamed, but Jessie's shoulders relaxed in a way she had never seen before. Later that evening, after Noah had gone to bed, Clara remained on the porch. Jessie sat beside her. "I don't have much," he said. "Just this land, this house, a stubborn son. That's plenty." He hesitated. "I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I know this. My boy hasn't laughed like he has these past few days, since his mama passed." Clara felt tears sting her eyes for the first time in a long while. "I'm not her," she whispered. "I know, and I won't try to be. I know that too." The wind moved between them. "I care about you," Jessie said quietly. Clara's heart thudded. "I care about you too." It was simple, honest, no grand promises. Inside, a small voice called out in sleep. "Mama!" Clara closed her eyes. She had boarded a train believing she was walking toward her future. Instead, she had stepped into heartbreak. But heartbreak had led her here, to a porch in Wyoming, to a man who stood beside her without hesitation, to a boy who had chosen her before she chose herself. Clara Whitfield had almost given up at the station. She had almost turned around. If she had, she would have missed the moment that changed everything. A little boy calling her mama, and a life she never planned but would never trade. For the first time in years, Clara did not feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was home.